Well, I'll definitely try and get the whole team together tonight. Not that you can do much in a bubble, but you can get them in the team room. I'm pretty sure you're allowed to do that. And just have a relaxing night, really. There's not much you can do or say. I think for the inexperienced players, you'll be trying to make sure that they don't lose too much heart, they don't carry the baggage from this game in terms of the mental scarring about playing Ashwin and Patel on spinning wickets into Ahmedabad, because I think the fact that it's a day-night test match, the fact that there's so many unknowns in going to next week actually helps England, because the conditions will be so different, will be so alien, but not just for England but for India as well. If you're say playing if you're staying in Chennai for the next test match, say this was test match number 1 and not test match number 2, that will be very hard. You're staying in the same hotel, you're playing at the same ground. Quickly the pitch would be very similar, you'd say, if India could choose it, if you're to stay at the same ground. So the fact they're moving now, they've been in Chennai for ages, it's a bit of a fresh start, and it's now a 2-match series. That's what you'd have to look at it, and you just have to park it. I mean, it was pretty much done after the first day and a half, this test match, wasn't it? So it's not as if they haven't been able to prepare for it.
So I mean, whether.
Well, I mean, I've just been speaking to someone about obviously England have been outspun the way they played and the way they bowled it. But if they do produce a turning wicket and then the dew comes down, and it might make it easier to play the spin, because the ball might skid on a bit. You sometimes see that in day-night cricket in the one-day form, that it skids on and people choose to chase because spinners can't hold the ball. It's a lot harder to hold the ball, so that might play into England's advantage as well. So, and if the wickets do turn, if they do go back to seam, I'm not saying India have got weak seams at all. That's the difference in this England side to Indian side compared to so many in the past. They're not over-reliant on their spinners. They've got a very all-round attack. But it does bring the likes of Stuart Broad, James Anderson, Mark Wood's coming back, Jofra, hopefully if he's fit in terms of selection, Ollie Stone. It brings them back into the game. So England won't be disheartened by going for a day-night test match. It's so hard, isn't it? Because you try and give players communication, you try and give them planning, not just for themselves but for their families. Joss Butler's wife at home with the children, all that kind of stuff. They're trying to do it so everyone knows where they stand. They're trying to take the emotive decision out of it. You're saying to Joss Butler last week, we thought about taking you home now, and he's kind of got that in his mind. Everyone at home's got that. We're just taking Joss as an example because he went home. Everyone at home, his family, his mum and dad, his wife, his children, he's coming home on the whatever date it was, and then suddenly for that to change because England have won a game, that causes a lot of friction on a different side. So that's why England have done it. On a purely cricketing thing, from a pure England winning this series, it didn't make too much sense in my eyes. Going 1-0 up in India is, not unheard of, but it's a great position to be in. And just by changing the dynamic, whether that had any impact on this game, I actually don't think it would have done. I think, if there's the conditions to suit India, and they got the right side of the toss, although I don't think actually the toss would have changed the effect of this game. Whether it had any impact of that, I don't know. But it's changing the winning side by 4 games. Even James Anderson not playing. How well he bowled, and he didn't bowl a huge amount of times. He might have kept carrying niggle, which they've kept quiet, all that kind of stuff. Being inside the fence when you're in the England team, all this stuff about, and then you hear, Michael Vaughan say this, and Jonathan Agnew say that. You think, oh God, they just don't know. They don't know what's going on. Do you know what I mean? So it's very hard to suddenly sit here. But it just
guess.
Yeah, we are trying to second guess, and the thing, it just seemed that, what an opportunity it was, and if England with that squad of that team, which has just had one against India, then to be broken up by 4 players is a big change. Well, that is a really, really good point, Angus. It's like, as a person who obviously the IPL was never an issue for me, that for them to, I know it's the modern way, and I know you've got to give the players opportunities, and I think England have been really fair actually over the last couple of years and giving these players opportunities to do it. But the big series, aren't they? They're a big series. An India away is a big Test match series, and India one day is after it doesn't have the same impact, in my opinion. That would have been the one which I would have given them a bit of a break to. They've seen it differently, saying that build up and that one day series and the T20s are so important to the World Cup, which I agree with, but it just seems that they could have rested them for the one days, come back for the T20, and then allowed them to go to the IPL. Would have given them more sense, even if you'd have played a weaker one day side. But we haven't got a World Cup going into, for a 50 over World Cup for a while. So that's how I would have seen it, and I'd have tried to keep them here for at least the first 3 Test matches, and then played a different call if the series is dead by Test match 3. Just quickly on it, I think when things go well, everything that's good in it, they knew as soon as England lost a game is what people will pick up on it. So they have to accept that this is going to be the collateral damage, the noise, the white noise, whatever you want to call it, that they will pick up for doing the decisions they've made.
Yeah.
Absolutely. The biggest challenge of a coach is how much to say and when to say it and what to say. Because the last thing you want to do is you walking in there and then say, for example, next week you've got you can have, say, Ollie Pope's in that thing. Hasn't really got a score so far in these 4 games. Looked okay, he hasn't got a score, without feeling like you're putting him under pressure. So they're walking out to bat next week thinking about their technique or about previous stuff. So Jonathan Trott, he's I think a good person to be there now, because he had to grind his way through a bit of his career in terms of being through the mental challenges, the knowing how hard the game is.
But a straight talker as well, isn't he?
Yeah, he is a straight talker. But certain players will like the straight talk, like being spoken to straight, and some people don't like that, and they'll put the shutters up straight away and won't respond to it. So he's been around those players, but done a bit of A tours, and he will, speaking alongside Chris Silverwood, that he will know what players like that direct feedback and don't like the direct feedback. And as a coach, you want to make a difference. So you got to, whatever you say to them, you've got to think it's making a difference. There's no point just speaking to a person because you think that's my job as a coach and so I've got to change his technique. That's not going to help. He's got to think, right, what can I do to make a difference? You haven't got anything to say to make a difference, then you just got to be there for the player and let the player come to you. As a coach, you've got to be there, right, what can I do here to help him? And if you haven't got anything, just be there to throw lots of balls and let the player drive it. And I think if I was there, I'd be relying a lot on Joe Root here. This is the job as a captain, as a batsman, leader of the batsman as well, would be. Who's someone who's in form and playing, he would be going around every one of those players and just checking in with them and just seeing what they need, what their thoughts are, and have a couple over a coffee or a beer, just a nice chat with them. You'd say Johnny Bairstow comes back, wouldn't you?
Yeah.
He played, he didn't set the world alight in Sri Lanka, but played nicely, and I think you'd want that experience, wouldn't you? You'd want the guy who's played a lot in India in terms of the IPL, as well as Test match cricket and one day cricket, and has been around the block quite a lot. So I think Johnny Bairstow comes back in. Interesting what they do with Zach Crawley.
Yes.
The guy they like the way he's played. He started his career. I think his wrist will probably, from the reports, is getting better. They said it's going to be 2 Test matches, wasn't it? So does he come in? So there's a lot of things for England to talk about. To think about where you said a week ago there wasn't a huge amount. So that is a challenge. And again, I'm kind of rambling on a little bit, but a week ago everything was perfect. A week later everything's not perfect. You've got to be careful, haven't you? You've got to be really careful, like when you're there, not to knee-jerk reaction, and probably you're not as bad as you think you are, and you're not as good as you think you are. You're always somewhere in that middle, aren't you?